You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. And be sure to smash that like button.
I'm pleased with how our teams competed. I mean, we challenged them that we needed to come out and play harder, faster, more aggressive, more physical and aggressive last week, and our guys did that. And the way that first half went, I'm really disappointed. We didn't have a more commanding lead going into halftime, but I've already addressed that. I think quite a bit of that was more about decisions I made as the head coach.
It was Zach Arnett leading his Bulldogs into the conference opener against LSU this weekend. Let's head to Starkville. Our buddy Steve Robertson, good enough to join us for a couple of minutes. He's on Twitter at ScoutSteveR. And, of course, you can read his stuff there at Gene's page. Hey, Steve, we appreciate it as always, man. How are you?
Man, I'm doing great, Matt. Thanks for reaching out. I always can expect to get a phone call from you guys at least twice a year. Bulldogs and Tigers are playing in football and baseball. So
I love it, man. We always appreciate a couple minutes when we can get it. Hey, let me just start with Arnett and maybe compare, contrast, just how different the program feels. Not air raid aside, obviously, but I just mean the overall view of the program under Arnett as opposed to Mike Leach.
Well, there's a few things that I would say. The first thing, and even that clip that you played, Arnett is never going to throw a player or an assistant coach under the bus. And he takes responsibility for things a lot of times as a leader, even when he's not the person at fault. It's just like, I've asked him a couple times before about going zero coverage and getting burned, and he goes, and even if a guy makes a bad play, Arnett will say, well, I made a bad call there. And I think he's talking to his team through the media in many respects. But, at the end of the day, he's the guy, much like Leach, that believes the buck stops with him. And he believes in personal accountability. And when State played Southeastern Louisiana, as players were reporting, it wasn't some GA or some student assistant out there making sure guys were there on time. It was Zach Arnett, And so there's a lot of accountability within the program. And it all starts with Zach. And, I think that's, probably some continuity from the elite side of things, but Zach also gives his coordinators autonomy. Even if he disagrees with a defensive call, he goes, I got to believe in my guy, and so he lets Brock make those calls, and they'll talk about it afterwards. But it's a little different on offense, as you know. It's not quite as finesse as it was. It's a lot more blue collar and smash mouth. But I think LSU fans are expecting to see a replica of last week's offensive play calling. Will likely be surprised come Saturday.
Okay, so let's go there because that's been very interesting here to see. Just because you become conditioned, Steve, right, to what Mississippi State was with the air raid, and then you see 17 pass attempts, and it's like, what? So explain what led to that decision to only throw the ball so little against Arizona.
Well, some of that was kind of the looks they were getting on defense. There were a couple times, kind of some inside poker here, is there were about a half a dozen plays that were called pass, and Rogers got to the line and liked the look of the defense, but not the play they had called, and so he audibles out of it. And, we'll go 13 of 17, just 4 incompletions, and 2 of those 4 were the first 2 passes he threw. So once he got to those 2 completions, he put together, a 13 for 15 day with 3 touchdowns, so really efficient. But there were some opportunities in that ball game, especially in that second half. And I think that, State got a little bit too conservative. And I think what happens, success sometimes is the enemy of offensive innovation. It's like, oh, we're doing this and doing this. And so we were having so much success running the football that maybe we don't need to throw it as much and put it at risk. And so I think some of that happened. And the next thing you know, you look up and it's a tie ball game. Yeah. I think there was some offensive malaise in the second half, and I think you'll see a little more sense of urgency. But, you go back and look, there's 2 plays that prevented that game from being a blowout. The fumble on the end of the end zone on the first drive after State goes right down the field, and then that holding call that by Cole Smith that erased a touchdown by Woody Marks. They end up missing a field goal. That's 2 empty drives where they sustained some offensive success and came away with no points. And I think that's is probably a bigger issue than play calling, is that there were a couple drives they just couldn't finish.
Hey, Steve, where is is there an unquestioned strength of this offense?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's really to be determined. You know, Woody Marks is the guy in many respects that stirs the drink, and that's the thing I said from the outset is nobody benefits more than a change in offensive philosophy than Woody Marks does, because we know what he can do as a receiver out of the backfield, but he's an every down back. You know, he's not some guy that has to lead the field on third down. And so I think as Woody Marks goes, this offense is going to go. And of course, there's a lot less decision making on the shoulders of one Will Rogers, you know, and so you feel like as they get a little bit deeper into the season, they'll kind of settle in. But I think Woody Marks is really the key because, you know, he's kind of the tip of the sword. You know, he's got to be the guy going out there getting 100+ yards a ball game, I think, to really make this scheme go.
Flip it around. Where's the biggest question on offense?
On offense or defense?
On offense.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say, you know, for this ball game is can State protect, right? I mean, it's like, yeah, you've got guys up there. You've got 5 guys that have got a ton of SEC snaps under their belt. But, you know, LSU in the second half of that game last year, they really took over the line of scrimmage, especially on defense. And State couldn't do anything. I mean, people forget it was a 13-0 ball game until Jaden Daniels decided to play a little backyard football and basically wills them down the field to make it a one-score game at the break. You know, State's able to go up 3 scores in that game. It's a different conversation today and a much different parity in Atlanta last year. But I think the offensive line, as good as they are, can they match up skill to skill with that defensive line at LSU? And I think that's one of those things you look at even on paper and you say, you know what, this is going to be a real challenge.
And Steve Robertson's our guest. He's on Twitter at ScoutSteveR. Give him a follow. Gene's page if you want to go read his stuff. As I was asking that question, Steve, it sounded like you were ready to jump in and mention something defensively. What was on the tip of your tongue?
Oh, it's safety play. You know,
is the weakness defensively?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the front 6 are really good, and I think they'll make some plays. I think against this LSU offensive line, they'll take as well as they give. You know, I think that'll be good. And of course, with Jett Johnson and Mookie Watson, you know what you've got there, the productivity you can expect from those 2 guys. But you lose the first-round draft pick last year in Emmanuel Forbes at corner, and then all 3 starting safeties are gone. And so you hit the portal hard, and I just don't think at this point that you've developed enough cohesion where you've got a ton of confidence against a very talented LSU wide receiver group. And, yeah, I know they're still kind of figuring some things out, but the pieces, the individual pieces there are very, very talented. And so, again, you kind of look at it on paper and you say, there are some things you can do schematically, but at the end of the day, at some point, you're going to get paired up man-to-man with a guy that's probably a little more talented than you. How are you going to handle it? I think that's the real challenge for this Bulldog defense is when they protect Jaden Daniels and he elects to go vertical, can they match up with LSU on the back end? I think that's a real challenge.
What about the third phase, Steve? How are the Bulldogs in special teams?
Really good in that respect. I mean, Kyle Ferry is a freshman, and they brought in Nicholas Barmira from UCLA, and he's had a hurt foot, and they have this freshman from Searcy, Arkansas that's come in, and he hooked one last week, but he's been outstanding, and the moment's not been too big for him. I'm eager to see what he does over the course of his career. You got 2 All-American returners back in Xavier Thomas, a Louisiana native, and, of course, Tulu Griffin, who's kind of become kind of a household name in SEC circles. But, you know, if LSU kicks ball in the end zone, I mean, it doesn't matter who's back there. But, you know, Xavier is a pretty skilled punt returner that's been a little bit banged up. He had somebody step on a calf in practice and gashed his leg open and had to get stitches some time ago, and kind of came back a little bit before he was ready, and it opened up on him again. So they've been really careful with him the first 2 weeks, but we expect him to be pretty close to 100% on Saturday.
Steve, I saw on State's social media it's going to be a stripe out, so they're going to go section by section at Davis Wade and go maroon, white, maroon, white. What's the? I know it's 11 a.m., but LSU coming in, what's the general vibe there in Starkville this week?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people feel like the timing may help State a little bit. Now, when the schedule first came out, I think even the most loyal Bulldog fans said, hey, even though Alabama and LSU are at home, you're penciling in a loss there. I mean, just from a talent differential standpoint. But, you know, when you look, and I didn't know this until last night myself when I did the research, in the last 8 games, and all of them happened under Mike Leach, in the last 11 a.m. kickoffs that involved Mississippi State, State is 7-1. They won 6 games in a row at 11. LSU was 1-1 last year at 11. They got blown out by Tennessee, and they nipped by Arkansas and scored 13 points in both games. Now, all of that and a buck will get you a cup of coffee at the truck stop, right? I mean, you don't know what that means ideally, but even Brian Kelly said on Monday, they're kind of evaluating what they're doing in pregame preparation to kind of get them going. I think that's a thing that I think is a real benefit for State. I mean, Arnett and this staff, they've already been through this for 3 years. They already have a system in place. Okay, how do we prepare for 11 a.m. game? So I don't expect there to be any change there. But I think it's rather interesting because it's so hard to get your crowd going at 11 a.m. But I think when you look at the numbers, State's done pretty well in that time slot. So there should be some measure of confidence, especially when LSU hadn't played as well earlier in the day.
Yeah, Steve, I'm curious if they're because my general sense from State fans was they would rather it at night. They'd have a home crowd advantage. Every time there's an 11 a.m. game announced for LSU, there's a collective gasp and sigh here because it's something that LSU used to play. I mean, you know this. You worked here. Like, they're used to playing at night. It's a very different thing when they play at 11 a.m. Like, it's hard to explain, but there is a collective feeling like, oh God, just get through this thing and get out of there when it's 11 a.m. So I mean, are State fans looking at it like it's a disadvantage playing early as opposed to night?
Well, I think that they see it as a disadvantage for their entertainment, right?
Got
as far
it.
as
Yeah, okay.
I would rather be on campus
Right.
all day and tailgate and drink. Yeah, and I tell people all the time, of course, I was a season ticket holder at LSU for a year when I lived in Baton Rouge. And I tell people all the time, if you're a fan of college football, no matter your rooting interest, you've got to go to a night game at Tiger Stadium. It is the best environment in college football. And I've been all over this conference, and I'll just tell you, there's nothing better. And that's not patronizing. I lived in Baton Rouge for 16 years. I understand what my friends expect down there. But there's something special about playing a nighttime game at Tiger Stadium. Now, at Mississippi State, we like playing at night, too. It's a little bit cooler. You got all day to kind of be on campus and enjoy your friends. But at the same time, too, when you look at the recent trend of playing at 11, and this isn't just like you're playing, the Mississippi School of Math and Sciences. I mean, State's played 3 bowl games at 11 a.m. slot, and so whatever they're doing to get the team ready, I think is big. Now, at the end of the day, we go to a football game to enjoy ourselves, but you want them to win. And I think it shouldn't matter what time they kick off, whatever time slot gives your team the best advantage to win that ball game, that's what you should support.
He is Steve Robertson on Twitter at ScoutSteveR. Give him a follow. Gene's page if you want to go read stuff this week, especially with the Tigers heading to Starkville. Always great to catch up, Steve. We appreciate a couple of minutes, man. Be well.
Take care, Matt.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.